So welcome everyone. Welcome to this session with Christo Tomy, creating empathy. Welcome thank you for giving your time. So I think Christo needs no introduction. Already everyone knows here, I guess. So over to you, Christo. So what we'll do is we will have this. Christo has a presentation prepared. So we'll just go through that, and after that, what we can do is then we can open for Q&A.
So whatever we're going to talk about today is not just applicable to filmmaking; it's applicable to storytelling, whichever format you choose, whether it is plays, whether it is story writing, novels, whatever form of fiction that you're doing. The things that we are going to talk about will be helpful to you. And these are the things I have learned over the past 5-10 years, during the process of which me trying to write my first script. Coming out of the film school, I thought I knew everything related to filmmaking, at least the craft of it. And then when I started realizing, when I started writing my first script, I realized that I knew it. I knew it, the rules in a logical way, but I didn't understand it to write it so that the characters will come alive on the screen. So it took me a lot of time to understand it and to learn to apply these principles of writing during my process of writing the script. So it will take some time. And these fundamentals of script writing or storytelling has been there for a long time, since the ancient times actually. So there is nothing new in it, but still, I was surprised in that a lot of people, even in the institute or wherever I've been to, a lot of people are not aware of these things, or they do not have the understanding to apply it during the writing process. So I think it's important to understand these fundamentals, and then it's up to you, how to use it, how to bend it, how to break it. So let's start. First of all, I want to start with a quote by Frank Capra, and he says, "There are no rules in filmmaking, only scenes, and the cardinal sin is dullness." So to bore an audience is only sin in filmmaking or storytelling. So the question is, how do we tell a story effectively? How do we tell a story in a way that we can engage the audience? How do we tell a story in which we move the audience? From our childhood, we are hearing stories and we are telling stories. Every day we tell stories to our friends, family, and strangers. Even from our childhood, we heard stories from our parents, our uncles, and aunts. So what happens when somebody is telling us a story, or when we are telling a story to somebody else? What is actually happening there? First of all, we are communicating them something, like what happened, and then we are trying to evoke in them the feeling which we felt at some point. Here is a quote by Pete Docter from Pixar, and he says that when what you are trying to do when you tell a story is to write about an event in your life that made you feel some particular way, and what you're trying to do when you tell a story is to get the audience to have that same feeling. So this is very important, that when we tell a story to somebody, what we are trying to do is make them have the same feeling that we had. Say for example, we are telling a story of, maybe we went for a picnic and got lost in the forest, and somehow we found our way back home after struggling for a long time. We came back home, and then we are telling it to our family, our friends. So what do we do when we try to narrate their events as it happened, in the belief that when we are narrating the incident, who are we are telling to, whether it's family or friends, are getting the same kind of feeling that what we went through when we were lost in the forest. So this is very important in storytelling, to understand this, that we are trying to make the audience feel what we went through or the character went through when we are writing about other people. So what I find most fascinating about films or storytelling or fiction is that it gives us an opportunity to go through an experience without having to face its consequences. Like we can read a story about war, or we can read a story about getting lost in the sea, or we can read a story about dying, and we can feel all those emotions with the main character, with the protagonist. But yet we don't have to face those consequences. It moves us, it affects us. So this is a very important aspect of storytelling, and I find it very fascinating. And whatever story you're telling, whether it happened in a remote village or it's a made-up story, people around the world will connect to it. Why? Because we are actually talking about human condition. Say for example, we see films about aliens, we see films about fishes like Finding Nemo, or we see films about toys which we know doesn't have any life, but we see those stories and believe in them. Not only we believe in them, it makes us feel, it makes us sad, it makes us happy, it makes us, it gets us to connect with us. So how does we connect to a fish? How does we connect to an alien? How does we connect to a plastic toy? The thing is, when they're telling the story of a fish or an alien plastic, they are basically talking about human condition. They're talking about the feelings that we have been experiencing all throughout our life, whether it's love, whether it's the fear, whether it's the act of letting go, whether it's the act of revenge, or whether it's the act of jealousy. Whatever it is, these stories talk about these emotions, and these emotions are universal everywhere, are universal. So that is why we connect to these stories, even though we do not know clearly how a fish think, or we know for a certain that toys doesn't have life and they don't even think. We know for a certain that, but still we enjoy Toy Story films by Pixar are a great success, because Toy Story, what they're talking about is human emotion, is emotions that are universal, and they are making us believe in that world, and they're making us feel that whatever the toys are feeling are real, and we connect to that feeling. So uh, so uh, but again, there are some stories or some films which we find it very boring, which we can connect to. Maybe they have great dance, maybe they have great songs, maybe they have great action sequences, very colorful, handsome hero and a beautiful heroine, but still, maybe we find it boring. Why? Maybe it has all the ingredients of what we believe to be a great film, but we still find it boring. Why does it happen? It happens because we are not able to connect to the protagonist or the hero. We are not able to feel for the protagonist. We are not able to root for the protagonist. We are not able to say that whatever the protagonist want, we want it for him. This is because we are not able to connect with the protagonist. And why does it happen? So uh, so let's look at what is basically story. So we read newspapers every day. We read a lot of non-fiction. So when I say that two kingdoms are fighting a war, and I explain in detail about this war, like soldiers getting killed, people losing their arms, or soldiers, their tactical moves, does it become a story? It becomes a detailed description of a war. It doesn't become a story. It doesn't move us beyond feeling sympathy. We maybe feel bad for a person who have died, soldier who have died. Maybe we feel something else for someone else. But in its totality, it's not moving us. We are not with those soldiers. We are not. It has not become a story yet. It's just an event. It's just a fact. But as soon as I say that a tribal king is fighting another king to save his queen, to save his imprisoned queen, then it becomes a story. A tribal king, let's say for example, a tribal king was attacked by another kingdom, and his queen was taken by this another powerful king. And now the tribal king is fighting with this powerful king to get his queen back, and we are going to the same war. Now we are seeing this whole war from the tribal king's perspective. He wants something. He wants to win the war and get the queen back. And we know what happens if he loses. There are things at stake. He might lose his life, and he might lose his queen forever. So there are big things at stake. So we root for the, there is suddenly an attachment. There's suddenly a connection with the tribal king. We feel that, this tribal king should win. So there is a, so I want you to understand emotionally what is the difference between, when we are just describing an event, when you're just describing facts, uh, and a story. We read things like, everyday newspaper, detailed events of, a lot of things, but we don't consider them as stories, right? So in a story, we have to root for somebody, the protagonist actually, and there are going to be things at stake. So we should, then we would feel what is known as empathy. We'll come to that. So these things are applicable every day, even with the stories that we tell our friends. Say for example, I am working in my office and I got this call from a credit card company, and I gave my number. They asked for my credit card number, and I gave them my number. An hour later, I come to realize that funds are being moved from my account, and then I panic. I call the credit card company, ask them to block it, and I call the police and I make arrangements so that I can get the money back. So this is just an event. But when I'm telling it to my friend, I will tell it in such a way that he understand the pain or the confusion that I went through of losing the money. So that is what we are doing when we do it every day. We do it, many times a day, but we have not completely realized that we are using these fundamentals of storytelling every day in our life. And this story has a beginning, middle, and an end. Beginning is the normal world where I'm just working in my office, and then the problem happens of the credit card, and that is the middle part, how I deal with it, and then finally the resolution, whether I get where I get the money back. So every day when we tell stories to our family, it has all these fundamental aspects of storytelling that we are going to learn, but we were not just aware of it. So let's look at what empathy is. I hope all of you know what the meaning of empathy is. So what does empathy mean? Empathy is simply the ability to understand and share the feeling of another. If you explain it a little more, empathy is a term we use for the ability to understand other people's feelings as if we were having them ourselves. So we talk about this word also often, sympathy. And how is empathy different from sympathy? Sympathy is the feeling of pity or sorrow for someone else's misfortune. What happens when we say that, when somebody sees a film and says that, I'm feeling sympathy, that means they're looking at the character from a distance. They're not really feeling with the character. They're not really connecting with the character. So what you want instead of sympathy in a story or a film is empathy. Empathy is when you're sharing, your feelings with the protagonist or your hero. Empathy is when you're rooting for your protagonist. Empathy is when you are, you are behind your protagonist, saying, you go get it. That feeling of connection, that feeling of attachment. That is what is empathy. And without empathy, stories doesn't work. It doesn't have. It doesn't resolve. It doesn't, reach out to a lot of people. So, so how does it happen? When do we empathize with a character? When we see a character on screen, what are the qualities that we see and say that, okay, I'm going to, that I'm interested in this character? How do we create interesting characters? Yesterday I was going through this, making notes, and I went through the internet looking for how do I create empathy for my character. And in many, I saw that building up likable qualities, like make him a good person, make him a person of values, and make him a person of making have qualities that people admire. These are the ways to create empathy. But is that empathy? Is that how you connect to a character? You cannot create empathy by creating a likable character. You cannot create empathy by creating a character that is morally good. You cannot create an that is how you do not that is not how you solve the problem if the people are not able to connect to your character. So how do we create empathy? So now I'll show you a film, and then we can talk about it more. So we are talking about our protagonist, and we are talking about how to create empathy. So here we saw a short film in which a boy. It's a simple film. It's by Christo Tomy, and it's one of his earliest films. It's about a boy who is just returning home. He just want to cross the street. It's a simple story, and what do we see actually? We see that there is a protagonist, and then he wants to cross the street to get home, and he's facing obstacles. So whatever story we are talking about, whether it's a story of huge epic scale, whether it's a series, whether it's a novel, or a play or anything, it basically comes down to this, and it's as simple as this. There is a protagonist, and he wants something, and whatever it is not important. But whatever the protagonist wants, the audience has to want it for him. See, for example, in this story, our protagonist is a boy, and he just wants to cross the street. It's as simple as that. And there is an obstacle, a dog, and he's afraid of it. So this is a structure for any any film that you look at, to any story that you look at. This is a structure. There is a hero, and he or she wants something, and whatever he or she wants is not important. Whether it can be a shoe, it can be money, or it can be a girl, it can be a ticket to somewhere. It doesn't really matter. But what has to matter is that the audience has to want it for him. This is the basics of storytelling. Whichever story you're telling, whatever form you're telling, this is what it is. So once you so whenever you are telling a story, you have to look at your protagonist and look at whether your protagonist is actually wanting something and is actually going after it. Here we saw a boy. He just want to cross the street, and there is a dog after him, and then he's afraid to cross the street. Now, if it is a story of a boy who is not afraid of the dog, there won't be no story at all. He would just walk across the street, and if he's not afraid of the dog, and that is the end of the story. But because you have a protagonist who is afraid of the dog, and then you have an obstacle which actually matters to the protagonist, the story happens. This is a structure for whatever story that you're telling. So how do we create a protagonist? How do you create empathy in the story that you're telling? The most important thing is that your protagonist, whoever it is, has to want something. There is something that he's going after, and it has to happen. If you're telling a feature film of say for example 120-minute duration, at least by the end of 30 minutes, end of your first act, whether it's 20, if the film is shorter, somewhere between 20 and 30, you have to establish that your protagonist has to want something in the context of your story, and this want has to be very active. This want has to be something which the audience can understand. It can be a girl, it can be a lot of money, it can be a shoe. Even a shoe, like Children of Heaven is a film about a boy wanting he loses his shoes, and then he just wants a shoe. It can be as trivial as a shoe, but for that boy in that film called Children of Heaven, that shoe is a matter of life and death. So whatever it is that your audience, that is a protagonist want, it has to be a matter of life and death, just for your protagonist. in that way, your audience will empathize with your protagonist. So one of the main things, one of the most important things is that your protagonist has to have a want. And the second most important thing is that a protagonist has to be active. In a lot of films, what we see is that we write a story and the protagonists are not active. By active, I mean the protagonist has to take definite steps in pursuit of his goal. I mean, in pursuit of his want, whatever that is. There has to be, definite goals, definite steps that he takes to get that goal, and he faces obstacles. Because if he gets that goal, your film is over. So he can't get it. So he faces obstacles, and you cannot establish a want in the beginning of a film and just let it be there. And if a protagonist is not doing something, the audience won't root for him. So it is very important to have a protagonist who clearly wants something and then is going after it. So you look at any film, that you have seen, there would definitely be a very strong, want in the film, and there would be a lot of obstacles on the way. That is what makes the story. So I don't know how many of you have seen this film called Kramer versus Kramer. It is a film where this character played by Dustin Hoffman has a son, and his wife walks out of him all of a sudden. Now he is left with his son, and he doesn't even know how to run a home. He doesn't know how to take care of his son. So this happens in the beginning. I think 10 to 15 minutes of the film. His wife walks out, and then suddenly suddenly there is a want that he has to look after his son, and he has to also look after his job. So he has to manage between this both. Or you look at any other film, whatever the film is, even if a film about a hero who is lazy, say you are talking about a film in which the hero protagonist is lazy. So how can a lazy protagonist want something, right? But if your protagonist is lazy and doesn't want anything, he has to take active steps to just being lazy. He has to take steps, like for example, say, guests are coming at his house, and there has to be a lot of things that needs to be done, and his mother is asking him to do some things. Now he can be there and do it, or he can just say to his mother that he has some other job and go to his friend's place and just crash there. So even there, he's not just sitting at his home and looking at his fan and sitting. You don't get a protagonist like that. So even if it is lazy, you make a situation in which he has to do something to be able to be lazy. That is one of the major problems even I faced when I was writing, or we went through a lot of script labs and script discussions and all that. A bigger problem, a lot of times the problem is that your protagonist is not active enough. And then the one of the other things is that your protagonist needs to have flaws. We all are normal people. We are not perfect, and why should our characters be? Like if you are creating a character who's already perfect, like who knows his shade, who's so perfect in every which ways, his relationships are all perfect. First of all, there is no person like that, and second of all, the character becomes boring. It's not interesting enough. We are maybe how old are we? 20, 30, 40, 50. So during our life, we have we carry certain wounds with us. Something has hurt us. Some relationships are not good enough. Some relationship has left a baggage with us. We are all disturbed by our past, certain incidents in our past. We have regrets. We may have things or people or incidents that hurt us. We are not perfect, and even without we knowing it, we are this way because of things, because of our childhood, because of how we are with our parents, because of how we are treated by our parents, because of how we are treated by our family. So we are all a certain past, and we all have certain defense mechanisms. We build our character in such a way that we can make ourselves happy, we can make ourselves not get hurt. So for example, if a person has a lot of
he's hurt by his family, he's hurt by his close mother and father. I most sometimes he'll grow up to a person where he has problems in forming long committed relationships with other people. uh, that is because he's always afraid that the people closest to him has hurt him. Now this no relationship is going to hurt him. That might be his defense mechanism to stay in a world and not get hurt. So everyone has this, everyone grows up like this. So similarly, when we are building a character, our character needs to have flaws that would make them more real, that would also make the audience connect with this character. Like in the short film we saw, there is this boy who wants to cross the street and there is a dog and he's afraid of that dog. And now by crossing the he tries. So when we face an obstacle in life, what do? We try out different tactics. If we want something from somebody, we first ask them, please do this. And if they're not doing it, we'll maybe shout at them. And if they're not doing it again, maybe we will use emotional blackmail. So we use different tactics to get what we want. And in the story, this boy is doing the same thing. He's using different tactics to cross the street. But what he really needs to do is that he doesn't need to be afraid of that dog. He can be friends with that dog. So that is what happens at the end of the film. So if you're looking at say if you're looking at say a film like Kramer versus Kramer, what happens is that this man's wife walks out on him because he is not a responsible husband, because he is not a responsible father. Now all through the film we see him struggle to make the ends meet, to take care of his son, to take care of his job, and take care of his son at the same time. But through that experience he grows up to be a man. In the beginning of the film he's just like a child, like he doesn't even know how to take care of his things, like he doesn't even know how to take care of how to prepare breakfast. But in the end of the film, he grows up to be a man who knows all that. So that is what films do. That is what happens in a film, that we have a character and he or she wants something, and he faces obstacles in getting that. But in facing these obstacles in getting that and trying more and more ways, something changes in him, or some past wounds heals, or he understands what kind of person he really is. So films are not films happens when you see a story happens in two ways. One is the exterior story that happens where a character goes after his wants, and there is also an interior story that is happening, that change that character is going through as he goes after this want. So in Kramer versus Kramer, in the end, this his wife comes back and fights and asks for the custody of this boy. But that by that time, this husband has gotten very close to this boy and doesn't want to give him up. So they go to a legal battle. They fight it out. The court awards the custody of the child to the mother. Now, husband has another option to put the kid on the stand and ask him who does he want to be, and he knows that the child will pick him because by now he has a very strong relationship with this child. But what happens in the end? What he also knows is that that is going to hurt the child for the rest of his life. Lawyers asking the kids, why do you not want to be with your mother? Why do you want to be with your father? And while Cross, questioning the child, that incident is going to hurt the child forever. So he decides to give the child to the mother so that he doesn't have to hurt the boy. So this is a growth of the character that is only possible because of what he has gone through. Because in the process of going after the want, he becomes from a child who does not take any responsibilities. He becomes a man who understands that in order not to hurt the people you love, maybe you have to give up things. That is not an easy understanding of things. So that is what Kramer versus Kramer is about in the inside. So whenever we are building a protagonist, these are the things that is very necessary. First, he or she should have a want. and he or should be active, that he should go actively pursuing it, and there has to be flaws in him. So the story becomes about, you know, healing those wounds or correcting those flaws. That is the need of the character. And then there has to also be stakes. What is stakes? Stakes is the things that the character is going to lose if he or she does not get what he wants. So in the story that I was telling you about, in the story about a soldier fighting for his wife, if he loses his, you know, he loses his wife, he loses his life. So in the story, Kramer versus Kramer, he loses, you know, his child, he loses his job. So there are always, in a story that you're building, there always has to be stakes involved. If there are no stakes, the audience is not going to get interested, you know, in your protagonist. So let's look at another thing. Same, it also relate to this one. It's drama. So whenever we are telling a story, people say, you know, there is no drama or there's not enough drama. What does we mean by drama? Drama is this constant battle between intention and obstacle. Intention is, you know, what a character wants, and obstacle is what he faces in getting that one. So every film or every story, that you have seen would be about this, that, you know, that somebody wants something and something or someone is standing in the way, and whatever it is that the protagonist wants, the audience has to want it for him. This conflict is what your storytelling is about, or what is the drama is about. So this is actually the engine of your film or your story, whatever you're doing. This engine has to be working perfectly for the audience to get invested in your story, for the audience to get have empathy for your characters. If this engine of intention and obstacle is not working perfectly, you know, the audience will lose interest midway through, or they won't be invested in your character. And it is not necessary that your story has to change a character from inside. Not every character changes. There are a lot of films in which the character doesn't change, but what has to happen is that the story has to force the character to change. Then the audience will be invested in a character. Then there will be a creation of empathy. If the audience are not interested, if the character, if there is no force from the story for a character to change, for a protagonist to change, whether he changes or not in the end, then the audience is not going to get invested in your story. Now, another thing that I want to talk about in creating empathy is antagonist. We all know what antagonist is. It is a force that gets in the way of our characters' wants and needs. Typically, the villain. And every film we see, there is a villain, where it might be, sometimes it might be in the form of a person, or sometimes it might be in the form of a, in this film we saw, it was in the form of a dog. So it doesn't matter what story that you're telling, maybe it is a story of a man climbing Mount Everest, maybe. So in that story, the adversities is going to be the antagonist, maybe of climbing the Everest. Maybe it's a story of a, in say for example, Silence of the Lambs, there is a very clear antagonist, the serial killer. So for having a story that creates empathy, you need to have a strong antagonist. And what do you mean by strong antagonist? It is not an antagonist who is all powerful. It is not, we are not talking about an antagonist who, who is huge, but we are talking about certain qualities of an antagonist. And your antagonist should be able to hit at the protagonist at his biggest weakness. Every person, every human being has some weaknesses. So your antagonist has to hit at your protagonist's biggest fear. In that story, in the film that we saw, the boy is afraid of dogs, and the antagonist, the dog, is hitting at that fear that the boy has for dogs. He's not used to them. He doesn't know how to tame them. He doesn't know how to be friendly with them. That is what he learns in the film. That is what his need is, to be friendly, to be courageous, to connect with that dog. That is his need. So your antagonist has to be powerful enough so that he or she or the situation attacks your protagonist in your biggest weaknesses. So if we can, so I want you to understand this concept not just theoretically, but emotionally. Think, for example, a sports, cricket. Say India is playing a game against, take two examples. In one game, India is playing against Ireland. In another game, India is playing against, Australia team at their very best. Maybe 5 or 10 years back. Now, which of these games would attract you most? Which of these games would get more people invested in? In a game in which we are fighting a bigger antagonist, like here, Team Australia, an Ireland which is a weaker team would, when India is playing Ireland, not that many people would go and watch that game, but more people will watch the game if India is playing, say, for example, Australia. Or say, for example, Pakistan, because we have a history with Pakistan, or because another team that is strong. So it is necessary that your antagonist needs to be strong to have to tell an engaging story, and to tell, not just to tell an engaging story, but if you want to get your audiences invested in the story, then you need to have a strong antagonist. The examples are everywhere. And also people are also interested in stories in which it's a David versus Goliath situation where your protagonist is weaker. Say for example, if India is a weaker team and is playing a mighty Aussies team and we win in the end, people are going to get more satisfied from that match than seeing an mighty Indian team beat a weaker team, right? We are going to get more satisfaction. We are going to enjoy more when our team beats a even powerful team. It's applicable to anywhere, even when in normal life, when we are faced with obstacles and we conquer them. Our happiness, our satisfaction, it directly proportional to the might of the obstacles, right? If the obstacles are big and if we clear it, we'd be more happy. Say for example, we are writing an exam, a class test, and compare it that with we are appearing for civil service. So they have happiness in clearing a class test, and you compare it with the happiness in clearing a civil service. When you're antagon, so civil service is a bigger obstacle. It requires bigger investment, time, attention, focus, and everything, and more stakes are involved. See, when you're appearing for civil service, when you're fighting for civil service, more stakes are there. Once you get your clear civil service, your life is going to be a whole lot better. But if you're writing in a class test, nothing much is going to change. You have to write many other tests. So there's a bigger stake when civil service is involved. Or say for example, when India is playing Australia and it is a World Cup final, millions of people watch that match. Because why? Because all this principle of storytelling applies to that match. Just think of it. India is playing Australia in the final, and mighty Australia, like it happened in I'm not sure which year, I think 1999 or something, when India played to Australia and lost the final. So let's look at all these aspects of storytelling. We have a protagonist, our protagonist, who is India. He's fighting an antagonist, another team, Australia, who is the antagonist. And because the antagonist is so powerful, we are invested in the story. Because the stakes are so high. What is the stake? It is a World Cup. It is it is a big thing. It's an emotional thing. So the stakes are so high. So we are more invested in that game. A normal game would not attract that many people. So and we have a want that is very active, very clear right from the word go, that we have to defeat this team and we have to get that World Cup. Of course, we failed, but that is not important. Whether your protagonist succeeds or fails, it's not at all important. What is important is that he tries his best. Say, for example, in that game, halfway through, India said, like, we are going to lose, and we are not going to, anyway, in which phase we are going to lose. Then the audience would be like, half the people would stop watching that match. When we watch matches or cricket match or anything, when we come to a point where, okay, it's not going to happen today, he's going to lose, or the team is going to lose, we lose our interest in that match. Why? Because because we know for sure the outcome of the match. Okay, we are not going to win. So it is not important whether your hero wins or loses. You know, if India would have won that match, we would have been more happy. If India loses that match, we would have been sad. But as long as India tries hard, as long as India fights hard, we are going to be emotionally moved by that match, whether happiness or sadness. We are going to be totally invested in that match. We are going to be, happy seeing that match. I mean, we will be emotionally, interested in seeing that match. So, all these principles of storytelling, it is visible in our lives, day-to-day lives. You can always look at your own life. That is what I want each one of you to do. Not just see this as principles of storytelling or just rules of storytelling that you think about just when you go and sit for writing. No, you look at these principles and look at your own life. Like how are we grown as a person? How have you changed yourself? Or how has your relationship with your parents changed? Or how you faced obstacles in your life and got something, and think about the satisfaction you got from, maybe some of you wanted to make a film, or some of you wanted to join a film institute, but think about that satisfaction you got in clearing the obstacles which get to those places. You have things at stake, like getting to a film institute, clearing the exam to a film institute, and getting there. You have things at stake. Or making a film and getting into the theater, you have things at stake. So it is important to not just understand these things uh, as theories or as rules, but it's important to apply it in our life. Not just apply, see the world through these eyes. Now again, I want to go back and talk about Antagonist a little bit more. So a story, a protagonist and his or her story will be intellectually fascinating and emotionally compelling only as the forces of antagonism make them. Like you all remember the story Dark Knight with Joker. And why is that film so popular? Because the Joker character is very popular, very powerful, and he's very fascinating, and that pushes uh, your main protagonist. So a lot of times your antagonist is there to eliminate your deepest and deepest fears and insecurities of your hero. So when you're creating an antagonist, you have to create an antagonist who is good at attacking your hero's greatest weakness. Uh, so you have to understand what your protagonist is, and you have to understand what his or her weaknesses are, and then you have to create an antagonist that attacks that. So a true character, the character of a protagonist, would be revealed in choices he or she makes under pressure. And the greater the pressure, the greater the revelation, the truer the choice to the character's essential nature. That is what you want to do. You want to put your characters, main protagonists, in difficult situations, and they have to make choices. And that choices will reveal who and what they are inside. So I think most of you have seen the film Bhag Milka Bhag. And if you look at that film, Milka Singh wants to win a race, and we see in the film that he loses many times. And why is he losing? He is affected by his past, and even during the race, we see these images of the past coming back from him, the partition and his parents getting, family getting murdered and massacred and all that. So what is that film about? It is a film about Milka Singh, healing his wounds from the past. So just before the last race in that film, what happens? He's not willing to go back to Pakistan, and he goes to Pakistan because he's forced to. And there he goes, and he goes back to that place where his family was massacred, and he faces his fear, and he addresses his fear, and he conquers his fear, and his wounds heal. That is how he wins the race. So even though the race is physical, that he just have to run faster, what is really happening is that he has to conquer his mind. He has to heal the wounds. He has to address the wounds from his past. So even the race becomes not just physically about running faster. it becomes overcoming fears or healing your wounds. So whatever film that you're trying to do, you have to understand this, that there is a hero, he or she wants something, and there are obstacles in getting it, and there has to be stakes, and there has to be antagonist who is very powerful, more powerful than you, the powerful the better it is, and an antagonist who kind of hits at the your protagonist's greatest weaknesses, and your protagonist has wounds or flaws that, in going after this want, in facing these obstacles, and in conquering the obstacles, will enable him to overcome that flaws. And there are a lot of mistakes we do in when writing a story. Sometimes we bring a lot of coincidence to help our hero get out of trouble. That would that is like cheating. Your audiences won't be invested in a character if your hero get out of the problems easily. You can have coincidence to get your characters into trouble, but to get them out of the trouble, they have to overcome those obstacles by themselves, by their own hard work and focus and intention. So say for example, you're telling a story, and in the end of the story, your hero dies by accident. What would people feel is people would feel sympathy. But if your hero but what you want is something happening to your hero because of something he or she does. So you want to be the hero has to be responsible for whatever he does, and he has to face the results of it. So you don't want accidents in your, apart from the inciting incidents which comes from outside. Everything else has to be a chain reaction, has to be cause and effect. Something the hero does, he faces obstacles. Again, he does something, he faces another set of obstacles. So this is what your film should be structured. Let us just look at one more example of from a film called Wild. So this film is about a woman hiking across the Pacific Trail, and she is doing it for the first time. So let's just look at the film.
So I just wanted to talk about one final thing. A lot of people, when they're writing character, when they're building heroes, or even when I was looking at the internet, I saw this thing that to make a character for whom the audience care, you have to make a good character. So in order to make a good character, whom the audiences care for, you have to make a good character. I mean, character with good traits, like he's honest, he's virtuous, he's hardworking, or or he's kind, he's nice to people. In fact, he's likable. But that is not true. Like when you see a character who is all that, what do you feel? You like him, but you do not feel the empathy for him yet. It is not necessary that a character has to have good qualities. I mean, by good qualities, I mean honesty, or courage, or any of these qualities for the audience to have empathy for the character. In this film that we saw, the main character, the protagonist, is going on a journey across the Pacific Trail because her marriage has just been broken, and because she cheated many times on her husband. That is because, and that is why she undertakes this journey. And just by taking this difficult journey, she is addressing her wounds, her flaws in her life. So a lot of times I hear, even I had this doubt for a long time, that if you look at the film like Nightcrawler, your protagonist is a sociopath. Still, the film worked. People connected to the film. So it's not necessary, and it is not necessary to have for your characters to have these good qualities like honesty, or kindness. You're not trying to make a saint. You're trying to make a character. You're trying to make a human being that is real and that is interesting. Only a person with flaws, only a character with flaws, only a character with vulnerabilities is interesting. Uh, so these are the things with which you create empathy, with which you make the audiences care for your character. You make your character, you make your protagonist want something, and you make the protagonist actively perceive it. There has to be stakes involved, and he has to have flaws, and he has to need something, which means he has to heal his wounds, or overcome his fears. And then there has to be an antagonist or antagonism. I mean, the obstacles, and the obstacles has to get bigger and bigger, and he has to hit upon your hero's biggest fears. Say for example, for me, a dog won't be a problem in crossing a street. For me, something else would be. So when in that story, the dog was a problem. So in creating an antagonist, you have to think about what is your protagonist deepest fear, and design an antagonist which hits there. And that is how you create protagonists or characters that are interesting, and that are bold, and whom the audience can relate to and empathize with. And it will be great if you can look at with these principles or rules. You can look at your own life, or look at the things that get you engaged. Just look at those things, like whether it's a cricket match, or whether it's some incident, or which is a story that your friend is telling you, or or some film that is watching, and look at all these things. Your protagonist, his want, his whether he's active, what are its stakes, antagonist, and even look at your own life, and try to figure these things out. If you are the protagonist, like when you look at your own life, you are the protagonist, and what are the obstacles that you overcame? What are the flaws that you have? What are and flaws by I mean not the exterior ones, inside as a person. So you look at like that, and I think that will give a whole new perspective to our own life and everything around, and it would help us to write better. It is not just by understanding these concepts intellectually, uh, you know won't make it won't make you better as a writer. Only if you understand these concepts emotionally, then you can write better. And I struggled with it a long time, but I'm sure if you at it, it will be possible. Yeah. So yeah, these are the things that I wanted to talk about. So I think we can open it to Q&A if anybody has any questions to ask.
Yeah, Prashant, go ahead.
So my question is this: as you discussed that create empathy for your main character, like protagonist. What if there are like multiple characters, like a movie about a friend where 4 friends are a kind of equal protagonist? So what do you do in that case?
Okay. So there are stories in which there are dual protagonists, or there are So first of all, so when you write those stories, you have the same journey for each of your character. Like each of your character will have an inciting incident. Each of your both the protagonists will have a want. Both the protagonists will face the obstacles. Both the protagonists will have this similar journey. If you are having a dual protagonist, and it is important that, but they are all connected by the same theme. Like you cannot have by theme, I mean in the workshop we'll go deep into it. The theme is the thing that the protagonist learns in your film. Like maybe he maybe he realizes that not getting close to people is not a way to avoid hurt, that hurt is possible in relationships, and it is okay to get hurt. So maybe he has to open himself. So say for example, if this is the learning of a protagonist, and then this becomes the theme of a film, then whichever character you're doing, if you have multiple characters, multiple protagonists, then they have to have the same they have to go through the same or identical or parallel journey of their own. They cannot go on a completely different journey in one film. Even in the cases of films like where you have subplots, where you have a film that I remember is Hidden Figures, about this 3 women who was working for NASA. So in that film you have one protagonist, and then you have other characters. So even the other characters is going through the same journey, is having the same learning, is having the same it's all connected by this theme. So even when you're making a film with multiple protagonists, or even have subplots and sub characters, your film has to be binded together by this theme. But every different character and every different protagonist will have their own turning points and plot points and all that.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Christo, this is Dhaval here. A nice session. So, I just heard this use case that you are sharing from Kramer versus Kramer.
Yeah.
So, what you started was with, so it was more like establishing a story and then creating a want for the protagonist. So,
Yeah.
like, do you think the position, like, how do you position this establishment of story? uh, you definitely create different kinds of probabilities, but something about that, because I mean, if you would have seen Fight Club, if you would have seen this TV series called Mr. Robot, and recently, so there was this Hindi TV series also called Breathe with Abhishek Bachchan. So I mean, you don't see establishment of the story at the quite early phase of the uh, production of whatever kind it is. Like you talk it a movie, you talk about it as a web series. So what would you want to say on that? Because establishing a story is like the essence. That's where it
I
should start. But then again, the
Yeah.
want is also that much critical, right?
Yeah. Establishing the story. What do you mean? Like establishing the world of the characters, or introducing the characters? I didn't get what you meant by establishing the story.
So Kramer versus Kramer, you established a story, right? So the person was married, and so there was a scenario around it. The wife left, and then it starts. So then there was a want that got created, that now he's supposed to manage this child. I
Yeah.
hope I make sense on that. So
Yeah.
that was the scene that got created, and then a want got created. But
Yeah.
sometimes it doesn't work like that. So that's what I was trying to highlight. Sometimes it's the other way around. It starts with a want, like that has like just arose, and in time we get to know, okay, this was how the actual backstory was or the scenario was, and that also creates a element of mystery. So anything on position of, like, I mean, I would not want to extend this, but anything on the positioning of establishment of story.
No. You're confusing two different things. See, establishing a story is not, talking about the backstory. Establishing, when I say that, there has to be one for the character, you need not know everything about the character. Like, say for example, in Kramer versus Kramer, the first scene that happens is this woman is leaving this man. That is the first scene. We do not see how their marriage was. We do not see that, he is not responsible. That we do not see that, he cannot make breakfast. In the first scene of the film, this woman just leaves. And when we look at, this man is having a perfect life. He's having a great job. He's earning a lot of money. He's looking after his family, and for him, looking after means providing financially a decent flat, and he is getting promotion. So that is how the story begins. So you're confusing two different things, and that is like, when you go through the story, then we get to know that, he was not a proper man. He was like a grown-up child. Oh, many of us are. So that is what something we learn through the story. So even in the story, the wild, I showed you the clip. Even in that story, uh, you know she has cheated on her husband multiple times, and her marriage failed. That is why we are, that is why she's going on this journey. But we are not seeing that upfront. So it doesn't matter. I am not talking about you structuring, that you have to always start, you can start you can start your film from the climax of from your film, right? Like a lot of films begin from the climax and it goes to a big flashback. It doesn't matter. But I'm saying, when for the protagonist, the story starts there, however order we are seeing it. I'm saying protagonist journey has a beginning, middle, and an end. But this beginning, middle, and end doesn't have to be in order. When we see it on screen, that order is something that the filmmaker plays with. We can start at the end and then we can come to the beginning. It doesn't matter. But the protagonist emotional journey has a beginning, middle, and an end, which starts with an inciting incident. He has a want, and he goes after that want. in this film we are not seeing, you know, the wild that I showed. We are not seeing that. We are not even learning that she cheated on her husband upfront. We are learning that as we go through the film. But that was a insight. That was something that started this journey for her. So it doesn't mean that, you know, simply because, you know, your character has a journey and that has a beginning, middle, and end, that in your film it needs to be in that order. That is not what I'm saying. We have not you know, gotten into that place where we are talking about you know, ordering of your scenes in the film. We are talking about a protagonist. We are trying to understand a protagonist. Like, we are trying to understand him as a person. If you're writing a protagonist, you have to understand him as a person. He has to understand his journey, and then you can decide how you do want to tell the story to somebody else. But you have to understand your protagonist emotionally first, and these tools are for you to understand as a writer your protagonist, and now how you present to it is a whole different thing altogether. Some films, you know, start you know, a lot of films start with a climax and then comes to the beginning and then goes through the story. So, you know, it depends. Or some film starts just before the climax, and then you go back to the film, and then, you know, it travels. So, you know, it depends on which way that you're telling the story. But whatever story you're telling, you know, something has to happen, and the character has to want something. That is the normal you know, journey for any character, any film. But series would have a different structure, because, you know, depending upon the series, like, you know, if you're talking about series like Unbreakable, or, you know, or, you know, simple series, you know, they would have a structure that is similar. Like, you know, that something happens and then these people want something. But if you're talking about series like Friends, then it is a series with so many seasons and so many episodes. So each episode you are trying to deal with something. So, you know, in that way, you know, structuring it, you know, their design would differ. But inside, even if you look at all the characters in Friends, if you look at you know, Ross, you know, if you look at Phoebe, or, you know, even in a series that is very you know, spread over seasons, you know, all these character would want something, and they would all have flaws. You know, they would all have, you know, past wounds. You know, that is what make them, these characters, interesting. That is what make the character wholesome. So, you know, this is a way to understand your protagonist for you as a writer. I hope I answered your question.
Okay, hi. Thank you for the session. Chris, so my question is regarding, you know, when you said when you're talking about the protagonist always doesn't have to be positive. I understand that. But, you know, when you're trying to show the complexities of a character, my problem is, where do you exactly draw the line? Because, for example, because a lot of times you might also end up making, now no offense to anyone, but you might end up with a movie like Kabir Singh. So my point is that how do you then balance that in a story? Where do you, we try to dig in or put across the complexities of characters, but exactly then where do you think can we draw the line, or should we draw the line as writers? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, with when characters are concerned, you know, I don't think, you know, there is a line. You know, you are free to explore whatever characters you want. You know, even if it's the sociopath, or you know, the serial killer, or anything. I think Nightcrawler was about a sociopath who goes on killing people. I think Monster was about a serial killer. I've not seen the film, but they are the central protagonist of the film. But here, what is happening? I think I not seen Kabir Singh also, but I've heard about it. But what is happening with Kabir Singh is a different issue altogether. With Kabir Singh, what is happening is that the filmmaker or the writer is trying to glorify, you know, his acts. Like, if I make a film about serial killer, and what if I glorify the serial killer and, you know, say that he is, you know, this is how you have to live your life. Now there is a problem. As filmmakers, as writers, when we write a character, when you write a story, my idea is that, you know, we should not judge a character. We should not say it is that, you know, he's right or he's wrong. once we judge a character, there is no point in writing it. It becomes interesting. Even our antagonist, we should not judge them. We should not say he's right or he's wrong. People are what they are. So in all these films like Nightcrawler or Sociopath, or Monster, they are dealing with characters that are otherwise negative, sociopaths and serial killer, but they're not glorifying these acts. They're not saying, let's celebrate life like this. Let's celebrate life by killing people. Let's celebrate life by, doing, these monstrous things. But what those films are doing is that they are trying to make us understand why these people are what they are. But what Kabir Singh does, I'm assuming, is that they glorify it, which I think is not that. When you're glorifying something, you are saying to the audience that this is your political stand, that this is what you think about life. That women should be hit, or I don't know what that film is, what happens in that film. But as a filmmaker, you have to be very responsible for what you're saying through your film. That is the political stand, and whether you're glorifying your character or not. But also as a filmmaker, you should be willing to explore these characters who are in on a darker areas, and only by doing that we will get to understand people better. Like people, like a serial killer or a rapist, or all these people would believe that what they're doing is right. They're coming from that belief, their societal belief. Maybe they have been abused as a as children, or maybe they have been tortured, and they feel like this is normal way of life. So exploring that characters are a good way to show the world why people are what they are. But when we glorify it, that I think is not ethically right. When we cannot glorify a serial killer, we cannot glorify a serial rapist, but we can understand them and we can make the people understand it. So I think there is a big difference, that as filmmakers that we should understand, and then we should stay true to the characters.
Okay, Christo, actually, let's start from advanced squares in this. I don't have a specific question. I have an argument about the idea of the hero or idea of the protagonist. So as I did my readings and stuff, I get to result like I understand it, which is in cinema, not in, let's not start from the ancient era, let's start from cinema. I mean the ancient era of drama. There was this movement in America of anti-American, it's a famous movement, and there where them cinema started to move toward the hero and to move the protagonist. So they make the individual, from the individual is the main idea of them society, and they pray for celebrate the individual, which was different like in Europe and in that cinema at that era. Which is they did not bring something new. The idea of the hero started from Aristotle when he established for this rules of writing or drama in his books. So who's the protagonist? For me, actually I understand there is a protagonist and this cinema is there, and I understand that hero journey and his stuff. But who's the protagonist in a film or the antagonist in a film like My Neighbor Totoro? Or what's changed in the end after all the obstacle the character faced in film like a Naked, in Michael Naked, or what is that? Where is that obstacles and resolution in film like a Persona? All the idea of a protagonist. It's for me, it's far away from our way of storytelling in the Middle East. It's a more Western thing, and if you explore the last 40 years of the Middle East cinema, we are a bit go away from that protagonist issue. Protagonist want and what he need, and he discover what he want is different than what he need, and that is steps of this journey, which is there in all the books and the stuff. So I have this argument. Actually, I want to discuss it with you since a long time, and that's it.
Okay, yeah, so I'll try to briefly answer it. See, even when I started learning films, when I joined the Film Institute, I was against this whole idea of rules regarding storytelling or rules regarding craft and all that. I was a big fan of all those anti-narrative films, like Andy Warhol's films, where he just puts a camera across the Empire State Building and he just films it for I don't know, for 8 hours, and his films just it has just one shot of this Empire State Building. And I know I loved all those ideas and all those films and all those films that push the boundaries, films that ask question about the grammar of cinema, films that ask the question about the grammar of storytelling. I absolutely loved it. I am my favorite filmmakers are Tarkovsky, so what I'm talking about. But through this journey of making the film, like I wanted this one thing, that I wanted my films to connect with the audience. I wanted my films to move the audience. Like I want the films to affect the audience. That is all that I want. So that is what I'm trying to do when I'm trying to tell a story, when I'm trying to make a film. Like in the beginning I said that I don't want to move the audience. Like when I joined the institute, I thought that I don't care about the audience. I'm going to make my film, and and my film is great. I don't care whether the audience like it or doesn't like it. But through years, I learned that. But I wanted this reaction from people, where they're affected by something, when they're moved by something. Because when I watch Tarkovsky's films or Bresson's film, it affects me and it moves me. And so I understood that there is a craft to it. Like anything you take in life, whether it's making a shoe, whether it's building a house, or fishing, or running, or anything in life, painting, or piano, there's a learning music, there is a craft to it, and there are rules to it, and there are fundamentals to it, and learning them will only make us better, and will only make us stronger in our craft. So these are rules that should help us. Not just, we should not get bound by those rules and say, okay, my story is such and such, that at 10th page the incident will happen, at 25th page my character first act break will happen, at 50th page midpoint. It's not telling you to do things and fill out your film, like filling out a color by number thing. This is a thing. These are things of the craft which will help you to understand a character better, and understand the filmmaking process better. Because like, let me ask you, like when you make a film and show it to the people, what do you want? You want acceptance, right? You want people to like your film, right?
Right.
Yeah. So we all want our films to be liked by people, huh? So when does the people like the film? When they are moved by it, right? When they have an experience out of it, when they are hit by it. So so these are the crafts of storytelling. You take any writer, you take Hemingway, you take Stephen King, you take filmmakers. These are the crafts of filmmaking, principles and fundamentals of storytelling. That is, these principles are every day. We can see it every day in everything in our life, and then we take it and apply it to films. It makes sense. It moves people. It affects them. I'm not asking you to, make your film by sticking to this, like, color by number book. But these should be principles that should open up your eyes to something else. Maybe you want to push this, maybe you want to break this rules, maybe you want to push it and break the boundaries, go for it. But but why say no to a craft? Why say no to a learning? Why say no to an understanding? And there always have been great filmmakers who have pushed all this, broken all this, and I'm a big fan of all those filmmakers, from Tarkovsky to all those people. And even today I love those films, and like Last Train in Marienbad is one of my favorite films. But now I'm interested in looking at those films and understanding whether there is a protagonist, and whether there is all these things at some level working there also. If you look closely in Bergman, you talk about Bergman, but Bergman, a lot of his films has this structure. I'm not talking about putting the structure in a very rigid form. But a lot of Bergman's films has characters who have wants, who have flaws, who have wounds from their past, who is always trying to mend the relationship with each other. So even and he has made a lot of films, and you look at all those films and you see, I think Bhagwan is a filmmaker who has been able to take concepts that is very intellectual and is able to dramatize it and is able to make it emotional to the people who are watching. He took themes and ideas that are very maybe not very understandable to a majority of people, but he made them into a drama, he made them into a story of human emotions, and that appealed to a lot of people. So even on all those films, even if you look at Tarkovsky's films, you can see this. Even if you look at Mirror, you can see a protagonist and he wanting something. It is there. It is when I'm not saying you have to tell a story with this structure as a foolproof thing, but you understand character, you understand people. Even you, if you're just sitting in a room, we all cannot. Human beings are such, we cannot just stay still. We always want something, right, from out of our life. We are never content with our life. We are never say, okay, I'm peaceful, I'm done, this is it, I'm just going to be sit here and I'm just being happy. Does anybody do that? Maybe sadhus do that. So or maybe people like that do that. So what does, so also want to point you towards so what does our unhappiness comes out of it? Our unhappiness comes because we want something, like you want to make films, so want is there in everybody's life, it is there, and there are obstacles to it. You want to make film, you are facing obstacles. So it is a thing that is making you alive. It is thing that is making you a man of flesh and blood. And you have past wounds, you have things, your flaws, and you are trying to overcome those, but you are not yet realized it. So these things are there in all of us, in all our people. And so that is what makes us life livable. That is what, so when you look at Buddhism, they say you don't want to be unhappy. Okay, don't want anything, just don't want, just stop wanting anything, so you'll not get disappointed. So you just don't sit there and don't want anything, and your life won't know disappointments, you won't know unhappiness. Just take everything as it comes. So you look at life and look at all these concepts, these principles of want and need is there. It is, we all have want. Every day we want something, money, girl, fame, career, and we have obstacles in getting to that. So these are not just storytelling techniques, these are the things that, this is how we live our life, so maybe
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah, like
Yeah, thanks for the session. Can you tell me in like 1 or 2 lines how to create empathy, not sympathy, in the characters we create? Like I feel like I understood a lot, but can you tell me in 2 lines so it will stick deeper in my brain?
In 2 lines, your protagonist has to want something, they have to actively pursue it. So want, active protagonist, and an antagonist that is powerful, and or antagonism, obstacles, and things at stake. That is it. Want, active protagonist, antagonist, that is hitting at your protagonist's biggest weakness, and then stakes, things to lose for your protagonist, and the flaw.
Okay.
And the flaw. What is a flaw? What is a wound from the past? What is a flaw that makes him a real person? So these are the things, I think.
Is it like necessary to definitely add this? Like I'm writing a story where there is 2 goons steal the purse of 1 girl, and that was the whole story. So I added some physical disability to her to make the story more interesting. And there is an emotional arc where she was innocent girl to a fighter, like she will fight for the person, get it back, like that.
I do not have a good idea what a story is, and this is the thing about not adding anything to a story. This is the thing about understanding your character. I mean, I cannot comment on your story unless I know it, unless I know it completely. So this is not about you taking a story and then adding all these things. Okay, let me put him a wand. No, this is what a story is. I mean, you have to take your story and put it into this thing so that you understand what your protagonist wants. It's not adding something in the story. This is the basic structure of a story. Somebody or someone wants something, and then there are obstacles to it. So understand who is your protagonist in the story that you're writing, and what does he want. Does he want to steal the purse, or money, or I don't know, I didn't hear, or somebody wants to get the steal purse back, I don't know. But understand who's the protagonist and what does he want, and what are the obstacles to it. It's about looking at things with the understanding of this perspective, rather than going to a story and adding something or changing something. You have to understand this concept emotionally, and uh, apply it.
One question is, while we're writing, how can we approximate the screen time it is going to take? Like, we are writing, and how can we know that how much screen time it might take? That is one question. Another question is just following you, like what you said about that we should not judge the characters that we write. So how to prevent that pitfalls? Like while we write the characters, how should prevent us from judging? What are the pitfalls? So these are the two questions.
Yeah. So for the first question, normally when we write a script, we have certain softwares to write it. I don't know if you're aware of it, like Celtex or Final Draft, or there are a lot of softwares available now, and you have to format your screenplay in there's a specific format to write a script.
Okay.
So when you write your script in that way, and according to that format, and then your one page on screen is equal to 1 page is equal to 1 minute on screen. That is a kind of an average this thing, that normally that is a rule, and it differs from filmmakers to filmmakers. It differs from people to people on how you write it. But if you can look at what you can do is look at a lot of Hollywood films. You will get a lot of scripts available on the internet, and then you can look at their formats. We will also go deeply into all that in the workshop also.
Okay.
So you'll get to know the format of the script, and then and then if you write your script in that way, then 1 minute is roughly equal to one page is roughly equal to 1 minute on screen. And the second question is, and then you will also understand that when you're writing action, when you're writing description, that will take longer time on screen, and then when you're writing dialogue, that might happen faster, even though dialogues might take longer, longer space on the page. When it's on screen, it might happen faster than when you write descriptions. So these are the things that that you learn on the way. So but approximately 1 minute, 1 page is equal to 1 minute.
Okay.
What they say.
Yeah.
And the second question is judge a character. That is what we are all told to do, even in our life, right? Don't judge people. Like don't judge people saying that even if we hate somebody, don't judge them saying that he's bad, or he's he's mean. They might, we don't know what they're going through. Maybe they're going through some pain that we're not aware of, so we are not, or maybe they have a past that is very painful, and they're just taking out all that anger. So when we have also to understand, say for example, if our loved one, our best friend got angry at us, but we know that he just lost his father, and he's just giving out all the anger. Would we judge him and say, okay, he's a bad person, or he's getting angry all the time? No, we'll understand him, right? We'll stand with him. That is how we should treat your characters also. Your characters are your loved ones. Your characters are your best friends. Even if your character is a villain, you should treat him like you should treat him like this, giving this quality, giving he owes your understanding. He's not there to be judged. So understand him. It doesn't happen overnight. You have to, it's a practice, and it and give, like when I try to give even to the antagonist, or those people, some scenes where where we get a glimpse of what there actually is. Maybe we see also them at a vulnerable stage. It is when we see people at vulnerable stage that we connect to them. Even when the biggest powerful people, maybe when they're alone, maybe they're just sitting at a corner, and tears falling down, or so so not only just understand your villain or antagonist or all the character, give the audience also that opportunity. It might not be true of all the films, giving this opportunity thing, but it's very important to not judge your character and understand your character, however bad you think that person is. It's important to not judge him bad or good and understand him.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
I think Shreya here had a question. Shreya was asking, do we also strive to create empathy for antagonist and other characters, or empathy is just a tool for protagonist?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Uh, yeah, so when we are trying to tell a story, we are trying to create empathy actively for your main character, for your protagonist. But then but you also have to give the space so that we understand also the antagonist. But it's not but it's not necessary to build the empathy, because if we build the empathy for the antagonist, then then we'll be split. Our who are we rooting for? We have to actively root for our protagonist, right? So it is important to create the empathy. Our empathy has to lie with the protagonist. Like when you're seeing Batman versus Dark Knight, who our empathy is with the Batman, right? We want Batman to defeat Joker. So we don't I don't think the filmmakers will try to create empathy for Joker in that film. But in modern days, if you look at films of Asghar Farhadi, in his films, see, these are all there is no these are not rules. There are no rules saying that don't do this or don't do that, or this is the only way you can do it. So if you look at Oscar for these films, you can see a protagonist, and you can see everybody. In that film, our empathy is with everybody. We understand everybody equally. Like if you look at Separation, there are four people fighting against each other and within themselves. So who are the protagonists? Like we understand all these people, and we feel even bad for that guy who's shouting so much, who is so angry all the time. So in those kind of films, we have an empathy for everybody. So that is what one of the most interesting things that Farhadi has said is that in classical narratives, the battle is between the good and bad, and we want the good to win. But in modern narratives, the battle is between the good and the good, and whoever wins will be heartbroken. And if you look at Farhadi's films, we feel heartbroken whoever wins. And even if you look at Salesman, where this old man has done something wrong, has I don't know if you've seen Salesman. So this old man attacks this man's wife, and this old man has done something wrong. But even in that film, Fahadi creates an empathy for him. He's weak, he is a very he has features like that, and he is having heart attack. So he doesn't create a villain so that we are going to hate all the villains so much and we want hero to win. He is playing with our values. He is playing with our morals. So that is what a good filmmaker does. They push the boundaries. They take the storytelling to new ways. So it is important to understand these concepts, but also it is important to take these concepts and push them. Apply it in your life, and apply it in your stories and push them. So when I was doing this course in screenwriting, I was a big fan of Farhadi, and I told my teacher, look at Farhadi's films. It doesn't follow the classical narrative. It breaks a lot of rules. And I think she told me that okay, but he's a genius, and once you become that, you can do that. So it's so it's important to understand all these rules first, and understand what you're doing and how it affects the audience and what impact do everything that you do has on the audience. And then it's also important to push those boundaries. So in a normal narrative, yeah, storytellers don't try to create an empathy for a protagonist, an antagonist. But like if you look at Farhadi's films, or maybe there are other films like that, where he actively creates an empathy for an antagonist, and you're torn in the end between both of them, and you want both of them to win, and it's not possible.
So here last two questions are just I'll combine them. So one is asking about what all to write in a synopsis with respect to characters, and then the second question is about let me just check. How do you go about a story if someone don't like it? I mean, how do you deal with self doubts or you know how to maybe correct if there's some issues when you get an input from someone? So,
Okay, I didn't get the first question, so I'll answer this question first. This is Sujana's question, right? How do
yeah,
you put a story if sometimes you don't like it? How? So it's a very important question. Like even when I was writing when I started writing my feature film script, it has been 4 years now or 5 years. I'm still working on it, and I just want to make the film so badly. And it has been there has been years. I invested a lot of years into it, and a lot of times when I looked at it and I said, is it worth it? Is it worth all this years? Does the story have it in uh, uh, to realize these possibilities? So when you're choosing a story, it's very important to choose a story which you believe in, which you connect with, which your gut says, go for it. Because making a film is a long process and it requires a lot of perseverance. So it is important that you stay with the story which you want to stay with for 2 or 3 years of your life. And there are a lot of times when you're confused about is it does the story has it, does it is it right spending 2-3 years? We'll have those doubts, but while writing it, we'll clear those doubts. Also, when you're writing one story, we'll feel that okay, another story is more interesting, and that doesn't seem to have all these problems. While writing one script, we'll face a lot of roadblocks, and we'll feel okay, it's done. It's not happening. The story is not good. Something else, oh, that is good. That will work better, and we go to that. And again, after writing for 2 days, we'll face roadblocks there. Every story, any story that you write is going to be difficult. There are going to be roadblocks. So it's important to pick the stories that you love, that you connect to, that you really believe in, that and then go for it with your full focus. But also it is good if you can work out multiple stories at the same time, then it is good too. And how to deal with self-doubt about your scripts. We every day we ask ourselves this question: is our script good enough? How much draft we write, it will never be good enough. It will never be, somebody will read it and always give notes. Even that always happens. So it's about it's about perseverance. It's about giving your best. It's about telling yourself it's okay. The process is important. Just getting up in the morning, sitting there in a system in your computer for 6 hours and just writing it. Just giving it your everything. That is important. If you give that, if you do that for every day, 6 days a week, for a year or 2 years, the script will come out good. Something has to happen. So the process is very important. That you believe in that process of writing in and day out, and things will happen for sure. And I didn't get your first question, so
so what all should be highlighted in writing the synopsis, mostly with respect to the characters? This was the question.
So it depends on what is your synopsis word count. Like different people when they say synopsis, they have 400 words. They have sometimes people mention 1 page, 2 page, or 3 page or 4 page synopsis. So if it's a very short synopsis, then you have a protagonist, then you have to then you mention your antagonist, and then you may mention what your film is about. Like you just in a synopsis, you just tell your story. You don't describe about your character. You just don't write about I don't know. I've seen a lot of synopsis in which people write a lot about character sketch and all that. No, synopsis means beginning, middle, and end. 500 words, you put your 120 page script into that 500 words. So everything that is not as important would go away. So that is a challenge also, that if you're right. So so maybe your film has 20 characters, but in the synopsis maybe only 4 are there, because they are the most important character. Actually in the synopsis maybe only 3 are there if you're writing a 500 page. So that is the most important character. So it depends on how long the synopsis is. But synopsis contains the story from beginning to end, with middle, and that is it. No character sketch, no other thing.
Yeah, I guess we can end it here. So thank you, Christo, for being here, and thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you.